Hi, my name is Ray Washburne. My family moved to Dallas in 1952 from Chicago, and my parents moved on to Mockingbird Lane. And in fact, the home they moved into is still there. It's at the corner of, I think it's high school in Mockingbird, and which is cool to still have, with all the teardowns today, that house is still there. I was born in 1960, and at the time, my parents lived on McFarland between Douglas and Armstrong, and I lived kind of an idyllic childhood. I was one of six children, and everyone on our block had four or five kids, and so it was a very chaotic, crazy, fun time to be a kid then because there were no video games or anything. So every night was out playing kickball or kick the can or some crazy game, and we just came home and we got hungry. And so we were out every night. My dad would take the old Dallas Transit System bus every morning downtown. He was a banker in downtown Dallas, and every afternoon my little sister and I would meet him about 5:15 when the bus came in and walk him back home for dinner. So we had a great kind of Leave It to Beaver childhood. A lot of great friends from growing up that I still have today, all these years later. And I attended Dallas Country Day School, which was at Loma Alto in Glenwick. It was an old farmhouse at an entire city block, and it was there from 1920s till probably the early 70s. Loma Alto, a lot of people don't realize, was Henry Exall's old horse ranch, and Loma Alto Street led up to that, and that old building that Dallas Country Day School was in was one of their old farmhouses on Henry Exall's old horse farm. And after that, I attended Bradfield, and when I was in third grade, this would have been about 1968, airplane actually crashed into Bradfield. It was coming back, a wing fell off of it. It was an LTV plane, and the pilot, as he tried to bring it in the land, realized all the kids were out playing football for YMCA ball in the field, and so he instead put it down on Mockingbird, and it flipped into the school and killed everyone on the plane. And all the kids, we all rode our bikes down and saw, the burning wreckage of an airplane there, and that's one of my earliest memories. So I grew up there. Then I went to Highland Park High School, graduated in 1979, went to SMU, stayed in the same zip code my whole life, including now. I live on Gillen, two doors from the Highland Park Fire Station. I built a home there 23 years ago, and so that's where I raised my family today. So love Highland Park, the community aspect of it. As a child, we grew up, came to the Highland Park Village almost every day. Back then, it had one restaurant, which was Los Vaqueros. My mother shopped at Safeway. We bought our school clothes at Singer Harris. And the movie theater at the time was one of the grand movie theaters in the state. It was a single theater that Fred Hobosel had built. It's the first air conditioned theater actually in the state of Texas. And we saw everything from, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang to when I was in high school, we saw the Rocky Horror Picture Show. It was showed there every Friday and Saturday night. So great memories there, and also memories from Skiller's Drugstore, which was where today Siddell's is, and it had the soda fountain where if you bought your school supplies, you got a free milkshake. So everyone liked to go to Skiller's and buy their school supplies. Where the Starbucks building is today, we call it Building G, and the Park City Club. I'm sorry, the Park House. That was two gas stations. There was an Exxon station there and a Humble Oil station there run by Dunlap Swain. If you can believe it, they're right next door to each other. Also, on the far corner where Wells Fargo Bank is today was a Mobil station. It was one of the first gas stations. Next to that, where Bank America is today, was Sewell Cadillac. And they moved there in, I think, the 1940s, and they were there till the early 80s. And that was a Cadillac dealership. And then next to it, where Tolleson has a Red Brick Bank today, was a Conoco station. His guy's name was Fred Malden. I still remember this day. Even though the thing was torn down in the late 60s, one of my brothers worked there pumping gas at the old Conoco station. So, and then across from the Highland Park Village, where our parking is on the north side of Mockingbird, that as a child was all homes, and the village bought those houses, the Henry S. Miller Company, over the years and knocked them all down. So as a kid, that was just, residential land and just a fun neighborhood to walk around and walk the alleys. And I also own Mi Casino restaurants, And we opened at Highland Park Village in February of 1993 and opened up with a big party. We replaced a tenant there, it was called Los Vaqueros, that had been there for probably 25 years, and people couldn't believe that Henry Miller had gotten rid of Los Vaqueros. They were getting threatening letters. They couldn't believe they booted him out. They had petitions and all these things, and that's something I walked into because I understand the community and the aspect of that, but I really wanted that location for my own restaurant. So we went in there and opened, as I said, in February of '93. That kind of started the evolution of the village at the time that Henry S. Miller owned it. Little history of the village is it was originally the Flippin Prather Company, and they were Jonas Armstrong's two son-in-laws. It was Edgar Flippin and Hugh Prather. Jonas Armstrong had been a partner in Oak Cliff, and anyway, he was a partner in the development of Oak Cliff, Jonas Armstrong, when the Houston Street Viaduct was built across, the longest concrete bridge in the United States. And they developed it. They got in an argument. He sold out his interests where Kessler Park and all is today. And he decided to go north and came up here and bought from the Cole family a couple thousand acres, which is now Highland Park, which is pretty much bounded by the toll road or further over at Westway, but really the toll road, which was the Cotton Belt Railroad when I was growing up as a child. It was a railroad until I was about 8 years old. And we used to put quarters on it or pennies probably, and see them smash. So I remember the railroad going up and down those tracks. Over to 75, which was also a railroad. It was the Houston Central Railroad until the 40s, to Mockingbird and down to basically Wycliffe. They bought this land, the Prather family, or the Flippin Prather with their father-in-law, Jonas Armstrong, and a little history before that, Henry Exall had bought the property in 1890s and got Drexel Morgan and Company, which later became Drexel Burnham. If you remember the junk bond kings of the 1980s, they bought the property, started development. The original name of the town of Highland Park was called Philadelphia Place. In fact, the street that the Highland Park Town Hall is on is Drexel Drive. It was named after the people that loaned them the money to build the original infrastructure here. Henry Exall dammed up where is now Lakeside. That's called Exall Lake now. They had a little lake there. Then they went bankrupt in the 1890s in the crash of 1897. And so it just sat there dormant until Jonas Armstrong bought it in 1905. They tried to resurrect it. Then Jonas Armstrong died. His two son-in-laws then took over development of the property. What's interesting, there are little landmarks around here named after Jonas Armstrong's wife's name was Alice. There's a street called Alice Circle, which was named after her. St. John, it's not St. John's, it's St. John, was named after John Armstrong, meaning he was the saint of Highland Park. That's how it got its original name. And obviously Armstrong Boulevard is named after Jonas Armstrong. So the two brother-in-laws then started to develop. They went and got the Dallas Country Club. It's just too much history. They got the Dallas Country Club, which was at Oak Lawn and Lemon, to relocate up, and they gave them a deal on some land. No one had ever really done a golf course in a community before. It's kind of the first master plan deal. And if you look at the Dallas Country Club today, you wouldn't build it like that today. Normally today they put homes right on the golf course. Back then they ringed it with roads and not homes, which is nice if you get on the country club property because they're not a bunch of houses backing up to, club property. So Flippin and Prather go to the Barcelona World's Fair in 1928. They become very inspired by the architecture of the World's Fair, and they go to the little villages that are around Barcelona, and they're like, well, why doesn't anybody have a village? We need to do that for our new development. So they come back to Dallas. They carved out the land, about 5 acres here at Mockingbird and Preston, and they went and hired an architect to lay out a shopping center, which had never been built in the United States. This is the first shopping center in the United States. And the reason it's the first time they had ever planned something where they would actually own the streets, the utilities, all the parking, everything within it. Before then, it was at the same time Snyder Plaza was being built, but Snyder Plaza was really a retail subdivision. The city owns the streets. There are probably 30 or 40 owners of property in Snyder Plaza, or Hillcrest along where Colwell and Son is. Those are all public streets. So they came with the idea we want to control our, you know, merchandising it. We want to control our entire environment, and it was very unique. So they went and hired an architect, a land planner, but they couldn't. No one had ever designed one before. So the whole Highland Park Village is based on the Texas Square, County Square. So if you go to Athens, Texas, or to Hillsborough, in these towns, it's the county courthouse in the middle, surrounded by stores. So if you look in the village, it's the exact same design. The middle portion where Mi Casina is, or the center court where Bistro 31 and all this, that was envisioned to be like the courthouse. And then you circle around it, and those were supposed to be the shops. I mean, that was their concept, because that's what they took it off of. So they could not figure out how to finance it. So initially they went to SMU. No bank would loan on it because no one had ever heard of a shopping center before. They'd loan them on one building, but not the infrastructure. SMU needed a grocery store for their students, which had opened in 1915. There were no grocery stores around, and so SMU agreed to lend them the money to build the first string of buildings. So where Cafe Pacific is today, down to where Cooter's used to be, was the initial line of shops, and the grocery store is called Hunt's Grocery Store, and that was the initial building built here. And we have old aerials of the layout, and that is the only building that was there. Everett's Jewelers was the first tenant where Cafe Pacific is, at that end of the building. So then they went on to do the second phase. They still couldn't find anybody to buy a piece of paper right there. And then they went and issued these bonds. You can see it says Flippin' Prather Stores Incorporated, and these are paid 6% interest, and they sold bonds to do the second phase. And so I guess they were paid off, but this is a $1,000 bond that someone sent me when we purchased the village. It was kind of interesting deal. And so they issued the bonds. They built the second building, which is where the movie theater is today. And there was a First Suburban Theater, as I said earlier, and this is where people would love to. It's the First Suburban Theater in the state of Texas. Up until then, it was all on Theater Row downtown on Elm Street. So they built the movie theater with these bonds. Then the village started to take off, and they finally got banks to start lending them money. And the last building that was built in the village was where Starbucks is today, or we call it Building G. Park House is in there. There were 2 gas stations there that were torn down in the late 60s, and the Park Cities Bank and Trust built a building there. It was George Dahl designed. It was up on a pedestal, and underneath they had a drive-through bank. In fact, give me this pink. I went to the opening of that building in 1967, and this is the yardstick. It said, I visited the Park Cities Bank and Trust Company's new building at Friendship Corner, Mockingbird, in Preston. And I was 7 years old, and they had an escalator down where Starbucks is today, and they gave these out, and this was in my parents' garage, and when they passed away, I found it and totally remember being there the night of the opening of that building. We renovated that building and refacaded it in about 2018, and took away, it had been kind of patched up over the years. What also is interesting about that building, the third floor of it was built for a radio station, KVIL, and VIL stands for Village, Highland Park Village. So the radio station here, a lot of people don't realize, it started here, and Ron Chapman would broadcast out there up on the third floor. So as the village then progressed through the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, it was really just a community center where it just really serviced the local neighborhood. It didn't really have any notable stores or names or anything other than little village record store, village bookstore, all the small, local stores. So in 1972 or 3, the Flippin' Prather families needed to sell the property, so they sold, of all things, to the Republic National Bank, had a company called the Howard Corporation. They bought it for $2 million. And as you can imagine, institution running it did a horrible job running it, and it just went further down because no money was being reinvested into the center. And then in 1976, they put it out for sale, and Henry S. Miller family bought it for $5 million in 1976. After that, they had to buy the whole city block on the north side of Mockingbird, which was filled with homes, and they had to tear all the homes down and add it onto it. So really, it's a little misleading to think they paid $5 million because they then had to buy about 20 homes to add to their holdings here. But Mr. Miller kind of started the transition of the Highland Park Village from a small local center by bringing Hermes in 1980. In addition, in about 1977, the Polo store, which is at the corner of Press and Mockingbird, was the first. Ralph Lauren had just started, and it was the very first store he did outside of New York City. As a kid, when I was growing up, that was A&A Chateau liquor store, and it was horrible. It was just this boarded up old liquor store, and they turned it into the Polo store and Hermes, and they started the transformation of the village into a fashion place, slowly turning the ship. From 1976 until we purchased it in 2009, the transition was slowly moving its way through the system, but they still weren't able to get the acceleration of the luxury brands. Even though they did bring in Chanel, a very small store, and a few others, St. John's. They still had some big department stores here like Singer Harris and Folk Brothers. They had Oshman Sporting Goods that were on the north side of the property that took big chunks of space. Their family bought the center in 1976, and we purchased it in May of 2009. And so the Millers owned it for, a number of years. So I had operated a restaurant here for 10 years, and one day I was at Mi Casino with my wife, and we were having dinner, and one of my waiters came over and said, they call me El Jefe, which means the boss, I guess. So anyway, that came El Jefe. These men over here are talking about buying the Highland Park Village. And I was like, no, there's no way. It'd be like Jerry Jones selling the Dallas Cowboys. No one would ever sell the Highland Park Village. And so he goes, no, they're over there talking about it. So he walked away, and about 5 minutes later, Henry S. Miller comes walking by my table with a to-go sack. And he stopped by to say hello to Heather and me, and I asked him, I said, Henry, I understand you're going to sell the Highland Park Village. And he turned white as a sheet and said, how do you know that? And I said, well, I've been digging through your garbage, and I've been reading your mail, and I've been seeing it. And he said, no, really, how do you know? I said, well, I just heard the rumor. And he said, I can't talk about anything. Call me tomorrow at 5 o'clock. So I went home, stayed up all night thinking, oh my gosh, I could have an opportunity to buy the greatest, piece of real estate in Dallas. So the next day, I went over to his office about 5 o'clock, and it had been under contract to a group out of New York, and this was during the great economic meltdown of the fall of 2008, and they dropped the contract, and so this is in December. And so we sat down, and we were able to make a deal, literally sitting at his desk, shook hands on it, made a deal on the back of an envelope. No idea what I was doing, but I made a deal, and walked out and spent the next 2 weeks over Christmas getting a contract written, and we actually contracted it January 2nd of 2009, and I had the spring to get the deal closed. I knew, though, that Mi Casino had been in here paying a very, very low rent, but in retailing, you get a percentage of the sales. And I knew we were paying a huge portion of our rent as percentage rent because our sales were so much higher than our rent. So I figured if it was the same for us, it had to be for everybody else. And so when we got into the due diligence, we found that the Millers at the time were focused on not putting money out, meaning not giving people finished dollars and giving them cheaper rent. And they had done the same thing when I'd done Mi Casino there. They didn't give us any tenant because you have to dig in your own pocket to do that. So a lot of landlords will do that. And so I knew there was opportunity there, and I knew Dallas was becoming much more of a fashion-forward city. So go through the spring, the world melts down. We get to April, all the lenders go away. We end up getting the Millers to agree to take a note back, and I patched together some financing on top of that and purchased it May 20th of 2009. And Immediately set off to New York with my brother-in-law, Stephen Summers, and my wife, Heather, and her sister, Elisa. And we went to New York and just started knocking on doors of the retailers that were here to see, what are you doing? How can we be better? And all those things. And came in and started redoing landscaping and just cleaning it up. It really needed a big cleanup. It just, anything that's been owned by somebody for a long, long period of time, just like your own home, you start cleaning. Like I went down in the parking garage here and found about 20 parking spaces that were just filled with old furniture and junk that things pile up. And I get it, because if you went to my garage, I'm sure at my house today, you'd wonder, what's all this junk doing here? But it just piles up over time. So anyway, we cleaned it up. The Millers had done a fantastic job in their tenure, and it was just a fresh set of eyes came into it. So we went into it, and some other notable things. I love trees. I came and planted all these trees that went down the middle. I could never understand why it was so hot in the summer. And so part of the idea was to create like a St. Charles in New Orleans or Bishop Avenue at SMU, trees that touch. It's counterintuitive to retailing, because most retailers want you to see their storefronts and see their signs and not have trees. My deal was, no, I want trees because I want the whole parking lot to be shaded so people will walk around the lot. So we bought mature trees, and not little tiny ones, big ones, and filled the parking lot with trees, and that made a marked difference. We did things like lighting. I hired the guy that did the lighting for the U.S. Capitol to come in here, and I wanted it to feel like at night when you're walking around like you're in a European village. And, bright lights aren't on you. It's just kind of glows like it's the moon glow. And, of course, we kept the Christmas tree lights that go up, right before Thanksgiving, and now we keep them on until Valentine's. People always ask why I don't keep them up year round, and my answer always is because it wouldn't be special if we did. You got to be special with the lights. And so it's those kind of things that we started doing. We redid Building G, put Park House in there, and then the fashion retailers started coming in because people started reacting to these changes and the money we were investing back here. People could see there was a change. We opened Bistro 31, which brought a lot of new people to the center. Patrizios that had been here for years had gotten very tired. We replaced it with the Honor Bar. That brought a whole new crew of younger people to the center. Then we get to the pandemic, which is actually, in reflection, a great opportunity for me, because when the whole world shut down, I'd always wanted to brick the parking lot. And since the world was going to be shut down for 60 days, I called the town and said, I can't wait. We have to do it now. And they said, go for it. Let's get going, and we'll work with you on, inspections and permitting and things like that. So literally the next day we got a contractor out here. We started ripping it apart. We ended up finding all kinds of things. Now remember, the center was built in the 1920s. And so the piping were all clay pipes and things like that. So a lot of the sewer pipes had collapsed. Water lines had collapsed. We needed to do electrical water lines. A lot of the trees that we had planted had gone into very hard-packed soil and had a hard time growing. So we were able to clean all that up. It had overlays of asphalt from 80 years of overlays of about a foot thick that had to be ripped out. And so we started tearing it up, and no one was here. I couldn't have done it any other time to just get it all done at once. We would have done the whole parking lot, but I bought up every brick I could. Of course, the brick factories had all shut down. So we bought every brick we could, and so we bricked as much as we could with the brick we could buy. And so at this point, and right now we are in April of 2022. We bricked the whole north side, and we plan on this summer on beginning to do strips of it over the next 5 summers to finish the south side and the west side. And so, but now we're running full tilt. Here, our sales have gone up from the year we bought it to today by over 500%. It's been incredible. And the more people ask, well, you're just going high end. It's like, well, that's really, Dallas is about 8.5 million people now. And where retailing is in 2022, most retailers are shutting stores down. And so, but the high-end brands want to have it to where you actually show up. What's unique about us, since we are, if you go to our competition, which is Rodeo Drive or Worth Avenue and streets like that, they're multiple ownerships. And so you can't merchandise your your merchants correctly. We can. So we'll put something like a Peter Millar with next to a Cartier because that keeps the foot traffic along, where someone else might have put in a Gap, and that's just not our customer anymore. And so we rolled out the curbs to where there are no more curbs, and it's just walkable. So the whole thing feels like a very pedestrian-friendly property. And so the higher end we've gone, the more and more traffic we seem to get, which that's counterintuitive because the Van Cleef gets about 10 customers a day, whereas Vince, who was there before, would get 100 people a day. And so, but traffic is just way, way up with these high-end retailers. So where the village goes in the future is we want to be the premier shopping place of the whole middle part of the United States. We have lots of foreign buyers. We have people who come in from Mexico, and they all appreciate the community of Highland Park. And really, we support the Bradfield, the Historical Society, everyone we can. We fly the flags in the middle. We want people to feel like they own the Highland Park Village, which everyone feels like they do with the comments I get back. But we hired a residential landscaper, not a commercial landscaper. So when you walk off Edmondson or Livingston or any of the streets, someone's pushing a stroller, they feel very comfortable walking through the village. So it feels like they're still on a residential street. And the comments we get from visitors that come here is like, nowhere else in the world do they go where a woman walks out of Chanel and very expensive clothing right next to a lady wearing, Lululemon, pushing a stroller, all feeling totally comfortable with each other. So the chemistry of the village really reflects the chemistry of Highland Park in that it's a family, community-oriented property. Even though it's got very high-end stores, it all works well together on a balance. Okay, well, we had a Tom Thumb store here that had been here since 1930, grocery store had been here since 1935. It was small. It was about 18,000 square feet. An average grocer today is 50 to 75,000 feet. The new Central Market that's going up next to West Village is going to be 175,000 feet. And so the little Tom Thumb here had sales that were going down every single year. So a lot of people were like, that is where I do my shopping. But when you really talk to them, it's like, okay, you run up there to get eggs and milk, but where do you do your weekly shopping? Oh, I go to Central Market or Whole Foods or a big Tom Thumb. So Tom Thumb moved down the street, and so that was a pushback. But we are very cognizant of keeping local retailers like Dino's, St. Michael's Women's Exchange, Barber Shop, a lot of local stores. In fact, if you go next to Mikasina, we call that local row. Every tenant is local. Hadley's, Madison, Peepers, Leela Rose, Dino's. And that's another positive comment we get from people. It's like, well, you've got these cool, one-of-a-kind retailers here. You haven't gone totally high-end. And so, and the other thing on that you find today, too, is with the internet, if someone's going to go buy a pair of khakis, they're pretty much going online from Gap.com. But if they want a unique purse or bracelet, you want the experience of actually going into the store and shopping and getting that rather than buying that and a lot of them don't even want to sell online, the big time retailers. So the neighborhood, they're people, but they sure love walking around and seeing our beautiful flowers. And, the restaurants like Mikasina or Honor Bar, they're very approachable menus. It's not, we haven't dumped steakhouses and, $100 a plate places in here. They're places people go eat multiple times a week. So we bought this, our family, Washburne family, bought it to Summers family, who's my wife's sister. All four of us grew up in Highland Park. All four of us went to Highland Park High School. All four of us spent, a lot of time here as children growing up. So we have an appreciation and understanding of what this is. We office here. I walk to work a lot of days. We get having the Salvation Army bell ringers at Christmas. Like I said, the flags we fly in the parking lot. It's very much we want to feel like you're in a small town and we're part of the town. And so we're not going real corporate. And so we try to share, as I said, people walking, like a lot of times when we had the Tom Thumb here, my kids and I would walk through the parking lots, pushing the grocery carts back, walk around, picking up trash. We want people to see us walking around picking up paper on the ground so they know there's true personal ownership in the center. But we also want people to feel like this is a community ownership thing. So the center won't be sold. We hope to have it multiple generations, and the idea is for our families to pass that, culture and feeling down, that just like the Henry Miller family owned it, they all lived in Highland Park, and Mr. Miller would walk around, everybody saw him, and you want to be the merchant mayor really of the property because people know you care. Okay, my brother-in-law Stephen is in charge of leasing, and so he's done an excellent job. He spends a lot of time courting the high-end retailers, and so he's in charge of the leasing aspect. My wife and her sister, they're touch point people, meaning the advertising, the marketing, all those things. They approve on how we have big social media platform. We're very cognizant on what people put in their storefronts, what their storefronts look like, how they dress their mannequins, what kind of words they put on the door, and things. And you get a lot of these retailers from other places, and they think it's just fine putting inappropriate things on there. And so they're very fashion conscious, and they understand fashion. So when Stephen comes in with a retailer, he has to go to them for the checkout on whether they would fit or not. So they're a very, very important role in that. My interest stuff is I'm an infrastructure guy. I love brick and parking lots and doing new storefronts and the construction and that part of it. So it's a very good balance, and it has been for 13 years, of how he, tries to find, the right tenant, deals with the wives on does that fit or doesn't that fit in the marketing. And so we all have defined roles that we never sat down ever and said, we're going to define this when we bought it, because it just kind of organically happened. Well, the original architects, called Foshi and Cheek, did a lot of the early buildings in Dallas. They're obviously not around anymore. Um, and George Dahl, who's a very famous early Dallas architect who did the building that we just refacaded, that wasn't one of his great buildings. And I own the Dallas Morning News headquarters in downtown Dallas, so there are a lot of buildings I am preserving of his. But the original plans for the village are down at the University of Texas in the architectural school. They were all donated. So we've gone down there and we've got them all scanned in, and so we know the original facades, or what I'm mainly concerned with, are kind of the architect of record for the village since I bought it was Omniplan, which does a lot of things in Dallas. But, at the end of the day, it comes to the detailing of, the facades and things. And, architects can do a lot of stuff. But at the end of the day, I got to call the shot on whether that window casing or that, and, deal with a lot of things. Sometimes stuff gets by, but like the Van Cleef building is an example, the ironwork and the stenciling on the wood, all those kind of details. So Omniplan has done a great job, but it's a good partnership with us. Well, we're in an economic crisis right now. It was a meltdown, 2009. I mean, the banks are all melting down. Dallas is fortunate because we've got a very vibrant economy, and people are still shopping. They're a little cautious, but look, we're in Dallas, Texas. We're in great real estate. It's coming back. So, well, like I was saying earlier, there's some that when you say Highland Park Village, it's Dino's. If you say Highland Park Village, St. Michael's Women's Exchange. Say Highland Park Village, it could be Hermes. So, but the big high end stores, everybody knows, but really it's the local ones that give us the real character of the place. Um, God, they're all over the place. I mean, because the thing is, our shopper here is probably in the village multiple trips a week, and that's unique for us. They'll come to Starbucks in the morning, go to Peter Millar and buy a shirt. Then in the afternoon, they're for lunch, they're going to Mi Casina, and then at night they're coming back. I mean, so it's I bet if you polled our customer, they've been here at least 3 to 4 times a week. Yeah, we're about probably 20% tourist and out of town, 25%. And there's so many because, I mean, Dallas, if you're coming to Dallas, you're coming here to shop. And we have a lot of aspirational brands. So people that live in the suburbs that have moved here from China or England or Brazil. I mean, Dallas is an incredibly international city. I think we have one of the most diverse populations in the entire United States. And the aspirational shopper likes things that have the Chanel logo on it, or the Hermes logo, or the Jimmy Choo logo. So we have a lot of, we call them aspirational shoppers. And those shoppers are mainly here on Saturdays and Sundays. Well, they're not really competitive. So when a retailer, uh, kind of a new cool retailer is coming out, retailing starts usually in New York City or LA. And when they want to go to the middle of the country, so usually if something starts in New York, next place he goes is LA. If they start in LA, next place he goes is New York. Okay, after that, it's really between, in today's world, it's between Dallas and Miami will be the second. Not Houston, not Atlanta, not Chicago. It's Dallas or Miami. So we're really either the second or third place they put stores in the Home Park Villages. I mean, they're not going to other centers in Dallas. Well, as a place to be and go to, as I said, we want everyone to be comfortable coming here. And so we're trying not to have it where people get intimidated. So one reason we put Peter Millar next to Tom Ford and Cartier, which are very, very high-end retailers, because it's not a high-end retailer. But what it does, it makes it to where you're not intimidated to walk along. It's just high-end, 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 like Madison Avenue might be, or Fifth Avenue, and places like that. So here, you balance. You got Dino's, which you look in there, you go, okay, Dino's is cool, but it's kind of a small town feeling deal. And then you walk around the corner and you're at Van Cleef, one of the most expensive jewelers in the world. And so that's the personality difference. So there's not an intimidation. Well, and people feel very safe here. We have a lot of security. We get comments all the time from people from LA and different places or Chicago where if they go to a high-end store, they have their stuff put in like a brown bag because they don't really see them walking down here, or they feel proud to walk out because they're not worried about getting mugged or something walking down the parking lot. So we are very, conscious of that. We have a lot of security. People feel very comfortable and safe. They're in an environment. And since that's a unique thing, by owning the streets and the infrastructure, I mean, we can control, what's going on here as opposed to some places where you can't. Like I said, this is going to be a multi-generational thing. Hopefully, our children grow up with the understanding of the balance you have to have between local and national, international tenants, and how that's what gives it its unique flavor and flair. And hopefully, with driverless cars someday, that'll loosen the parking up a little bit. So, we'll see on that. One thing is, if you look at the Hom Park Village, every block facade. So we have pretty much seven blocks here. You have, if you look at it, because we're bisected by some different streets, like between Honor Bar and Cafe Pacific, or going the other way with Livingston Court. Every facade of the building is different. And when I take people on an architectural tour of the village, it's like it all looks like it's not. Every facade is different, and it was kind of designed in this Moorish, Spanish feel, but for example, the two-story building that we're in now on the north side of the property, if you look at the top of it, the cast stone and things in it, some buildings are all stucco, some are covered in cast stone. So you want to maintain the culture of the kind of funkiness, the architecture, but it was built, over about 60 years, different building sites. The last one was the Park House building. And if you stand back and look at that, people will think, oh, that was an original building, the way we did it. And then you look at the tile work on it and the stonework, it mimics some of the other buildings here, but it's also unique to itself. The clock tower in the middle was the first thing I built. And I told the architects, I said, I want it to look like it's been here forever, but don't make it look like Disney. And I've had people swear it's been here for 80 years. And that clock tower, the reason we put it there is I needed an elevator to get ADA, to get people up to the second floor. Instead of burying the elevator somewhere, we created that clock tower out of it. And so those are unique aspects of the architecture. And you stand back and look at the building next to the movie theater. There's a balcony along that second floor. It's a faux balcony. We kind of mimic that a little bit in the Park House building. And so preservation is very important to us, but we also realize this is a organic, growing ecosystem that isn't one building that is one architecture alike. The red brick parking lots, for example, that brick, you look at the richness it brings to the buildings that's around is something. So a lot of things that I'm doing here, to the blind eye, you wouldn't notice, but it all adds up. It's like going to a restaurant. It's like first thing you see when you walk in a restaurant is, which you don't really, until you said, I'm telling you this, you probably don't really notice the temperature, the lighting, the music. You sit down at the table, how quick do they meet you at the front door? What's the silverware like? What's the is it a cloth napkin, a polyester napkin? Do they have china? All those type things, that's the same thing with here. As soon as you turn in off Preston Road, we have the 2 fountains we put in at the front. We have tulips or flowers at the front. You feel good. And I want someone, as soon as they hit the property, go, I feel so good, I want to go shop. And so as you turn in, that's the idea, is let's create a feeling. So the preservation part is very important to us about maintaining, but it's not going to be something that, and we're not going to tear buildings down, but the little nips and tucks we do, for example, the Van Cleef building, we just added a second floor to it, which just finished a few months ago. If you looked at it now, you would say that has been there since the beginning. It's brand new. Well, the feel and identity really is, this is a pedestrian experience. This is a walkability. And so everything we look at is, that's why we got rid of the curbs. So as you're walking along, you feel, and the traffic is so, another thing about, people complain about the parking. They complain about, oh, it's so tight. But you know what that does? That slows the traffic down. If you go to Snyder Plaza, cars are shooting through there. You go to a lot of places. Here, everyone's waiting about grandma backing out and hitting them. So cars go very slow through the parking lot. That's by design. And so we want people not to feel like they have to walk to the end of the street and cross at a crosswalk. I like them weaving in and out of cars. I think that makes it, kind of a little gritty and a little urban and not as planned. And, when you go to these shopping centers in the suburbs that have been these planned centers with like I said, no trees, and you just, such wide widths between, a lot of places you can't park in front of the grocery store. Next time you go to a suburban store, they don't have a parking row in front of the store. So you have to park and then walk across. I want it to where you park and go right in, and some people are like, well, you're blocking the storefront. So get out of your car and walk around. So that's what I'm preserving is, I want, little Johnny and Susie to ride their bikes through here in the afternoon, the kids, and feel just as comfortable as somebody shopping with a high-end shopping bag. I mean, that's the uniqueness of this place.